Next one is Mr. Sirois for the RCDA. The Russo-Canadian Democratic Alliance, Mr. Blair.
Thank you.
Merci, Madame la Commissaire. You'll probably be happy to learn that I won't be asking any questions about a warrant.
I don't mind, sir.
No, during your testimony before this commission, you testified in the spring, you testified that you did not see any evidence of Russian interference directed at the outcome of the 2019 and 2021 general elections. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
But you also mentioned that the Russians were influencing other types of public opinion during both elections, although it was not directed at the outcome of the elections. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
We didn't have time to finish that conversation last time because we have a very limited time, but I want to give you an opportunity to explain what types of public opinion the Russians were influencing during both elections, if you remember.
Now, we have seen evidence in that election and subsequently in political interference, the hostile activity of a number of different countries, including Russia, which is intended, different countries have different approaches to influence and interference. But what we were seeing rather predominantly at that time from Russia was misinformation and disinformation, which I believe was intended to have the effect of causing undermining public confidence in important public institutions and inciting dissent more broadly. And that in and of itself could be challenging. What I did not have evidence of and did not witness during that particular election was overt efforts of that country to interfere with the election itself, but rather with Canadian society and Canadian perceptions of elections, et cetera.
So pretty clear attempts to interfere with elections during the 2016 U.S. presidential election and the 2017 French presidential election as well. So do I understand from your testimony that we didn't see that in Canada, and that's kind of...
And to be clear, I was not presented with evidence of that. There was, I think, a necessary and appropriate focus among our national security intelligence agencies on a number of concerning activities that were overt, covert, and represented a significant national security risk to important public institutions like our electoral system that were deeply concerning and which we have testified to. But I was not presented with evidence specifically of Russia engaging in that activity, save and except for what I've already described.
All right, I appreciate that. And if I know there was no massive hack and steal attempts from Russia and the subsequent disinformation like we've seen in the US and in France. I'm wondering if it's only theoretical to think that certain political parties may use this dissent that is amplified by Russia for their own political gains during an election, for instance.
And again, I think you're asking me to opine on something that I really don't feel qualified to offer.
That's fair.
I'm not in receipt of information intelligence that I could rely on to form that belief. And again, I am well aware of the hostile activities that certain foreign actors engage in undermining our institutions and attempting to interfere with important aspects of our society and those institutions. But with respect to the motivation of others, not those hostile states, but others, I don't feel comfortable and confident to be able to offer an opinion.
No, that's totally fair, and I appreciate your answers. I'll move to a different topic now, not one that concerns your current functions as Minister of National Defense. I'll be blunt. Would you agree that Russia is engaged in a hybrid war with the West, including Canada, at the moment?
In what kind of war, sir?
Hybrid warfare, one that is short of actual military confrontation with kinetic confrontation, but everything that is short of that, including disinformation and interference with elections.
We also, if I may, there's also a number of non-kinetic hostile activities that Russia is clearly engaged in, including cyber attacks, and even some criminal and some obviously politically motivated cyber attacks on our critical infrastructure, our data, our information systems. As I've already alluded to, they are engaged in a number of misinformation and disinformation activities. I think the motive that is apparent from Russia is to disrupt and cause chaos and social division within the country. There are other approaches by other hostile nations that are a little bit more long-term and perhaps a little bit more strategic, but that's my observation for the concerns we have. Some of it is kinetic, and so we're seeing also activities from certain countries, including Russia, much related to the current war in Ukraine, but also issues of concern with respect to Canada's high north and the Arctic.
Would it be fair to say, I noticed you mentioned the Arctic, it's a very interesting topic as well. Would it be fair to say that Russia sees itself in a war with the West, including Canada?
Not a declared war. I think we very clearly, and I am very comfortable saying that they engage in what we have termed as hostile activities of a state actor that is directed towards the West generally and includes Canada.
Okay. And I'm wondering if we could pull up RCD 88 at page 25, but first I'll present to you the document. Because we've heard from some witnesses that Russia is engaged in a cognitive warfare, hybrid warfare, cognitive combat, information warfare. So there are a lot of words being thrown around. And I understand your testimony. Please, can we stay at the first page for now? I'll present the document to the witnesses. Yes, so there's a lot of terminology being floated around. And I'm not sure that's proper forum to have that debate. But I'm wondering if we have any, if we can discuss about what follows from this situation. What kind of recommendations would you have to better counter Russia's aggressive behavior towards Canada, including and especially our democratic institutions, which is the focus of this commission? So this is an article from a monography edited by Bradley Bauman titled "Cognitive Combat: China, Russia, and Iran's Information War Against Americans," published on June 2024. We can go now to page 25. Please. Would information war be an appropriate term, Minister Blair?
Can I just suggest, I'm very reluctant here testifying under oath to comment on a newspaper article I have not yet read.
Oh, okay.
And quite frankly, I don't know anything about the basis, the evidentiary basis for what is written here.
Yep.
And so I'm very uncomfortable with the idea of commenting on newspaper articles, for example.
Oh yeah, just for the record, it is not a newspaper article. It is an academic article published by academics and postdoctoral fellows. But in any event, I'll try to move on just from the idea of the terminology, because that's not the main issue here. There are some recommendations in this article, and I want to have your opinion how to better counteract Russia's hostile activities in Canada directed at our democratic institutions, which again is the focus of this Commission of Inquiry. One of the recommendations, well, there are three recommendations here, but globally, generally, they say that it is time to take the fight to Moscow in their information domain. That will require countering both Russia's information technical and information psychological efforts. The following recommendations can help Washington proactively counter Russian disinformation and reach key audiences within Russia and elsewhere. So, if it may help you be more comfortable, this similar question to Mélanie Joly yesterday, and she essentially agreed that sharing more information, more truthful information with Russians abroad and with the global South were recommendations that she's already implementing. In fact, that she's already having interviews with radios across Europe to promote the democracy and the ideals. But I want to know from a national defense perspective, is it something that you'd agree is a recommendation that Canada should implement?
Well, first of all, let me strongly agree that I think one of the best antidotes to misinformation and disinformation is the truth. And so I think it's very important that we should always tell the truth. I think there are also, because the media of this misinformation and disinformation is often online. And so some of the legislative reforms that our government has introduced with respect to dealing with online harms is also an appropriate response to that threat.
And what's your department's role, Department of National Defense role in doing that?
Yeah, the Department of National Defense, our primary function is deterrence and to protect the national interest and the national security. National defense and national security are very closely aligned, and they're all within the umbrella of Canada's foreign policy. And so I think it's a whole of government response, and I think that's what Mr. Joly would have also have indicated to this panel. There are a number of things that we can and are doing in response. Quite frankly, it would not be in the national interest to discuss that too openly here.
Right. I appreciate your answers, Merci.